our audience if they can hear us. So we are ready to go.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So welcome everyone. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Thumbprint Conversation. And we are doing this series called Why Women Write. And we've been talking to women from different genres who write. And tonight we are going to talk to someone has written that Dr. Bora, you seem to be a little distant from the mic. Is your volume on? The phone volume?
Yes,
full?
it's fully on. Yeah, it's on.
Okay. Yeah. I can hear you. I'm sure.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Bikram?
Yes.
All
You're
right,
clear now.
that's nice.
Yeah. So let me introduce Dr. Bora. Dr. Bora is a former professor of Dibrugarh University and currently the convener of the Assam State Chapter of the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage. She has traveled extensively in the United States as a two-time Fulbright Fellow. As a life member of the Indian History Congress and Northeast India History Association, Bora has been appointed guest faculty at the Departments of History and the Department of Women's Studies in Gauhati University. She has written several books and is currently engaged in the work of translating and editing 13 Buranjis of Assam, which has been edited and published by Dr. S.K. Bhuyan into Assamese into English. So welcome, Dr. Bora. Tell us, how have you survived the lockdown?
Well, I think I have hadn't had much problem with the lockdown because I was very busy with my work as usual, writing most of the time. So it didn't make much of a difference to me, except that instead of meeting my colleagues at workplace, I missed them and I had to sit at home and work.
Okay.
But at the outset, before I proceed, I would like to thank you, Teresa, for giving me this opportunity to have this chat with you.
Thank you.
I can see one of my friends saying that she can't see me well. Anwara, is it all right? Can you see me now?
I think it should be okay. And when we, download it, upload it on YouTube, I think that would be fine. Okay. So, Dr. Bora, you are a historian. And don't you think that most of the her story is missing from the his story that we read? And how can we turn the tables?
Well, Teresa, everything in history is a his story. There is no woman in history, except for one or two very exceptional women. I wonder, when men wrote this history, where they thought the women were, half the world were. Were they sitting idle? Were they not doing anything? It's very surprising how they wrote this kind of history, and then they themselves patted each other on the back and thought they were doing a very good job. But it is going to take a very, very long time before women can be brought back into their prospective, places where they belong. It is going to need a lot of research. As you know, women never wrote, never kept any records. So records are missing about what they did. Even if we try to do something, you see, we don't find enough of source materials to bring them into history. So there is a lot of problem, but I'm sure it will be done.
And regarding the history of Northeast India, I mean, we hardly get to read the history of Northeast India. And when you talk about the women of Northeast India, so there's a missing link. So how do you see that evolving over the years?
Teresa, it's a very long and sad story. If you look at Assam's history, it has a flourishing tradition of oral literature, and we can attribute a lot of it to the women, you know. But if you look at written stories, this is well understood. Writing has always been considered to be a male activity, never a woman's activity. And it was also believed that if male sexuality is integrally associated with the presence of literary power, female sexuality is associated by the absence of that literary power. So, and very interesting, I think many of my viewers may have read this book called The Mad Woman in the Attic, where the two authors, Sandra Gilbert and Susan Goubert, have discussed the idea of the pen being a metaphorical penis. So we find that women were totally absent till the coming of the British. If you allow me, I'll give you a little bit of the history, how women came into writing.
Sure.
There were the Indian social reformers. We know of people like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who talked of a number of social reforms, brought in a lot of legal reforms. But while they were doing this, they never consulted women, whether women themselves felt that these reforms were useful for them.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, by the end of this century, there was a review on the reforms, but men sat together and reviewed how these reforms have helped women. We have discovered diaries from Bengal and other places where women have said that, their effort to help us educate our men has been very, very disturbing for us, because men leave the villages, they go away to these big towns, they start drinking, they get into the habit of going to clubs, then they don't like to mix with the women folk at home because they have nothing common to talk. So it was not a very, very pleasant idea for them, There are many stories like that. But anyway, then on the other hand, there were the missionaries who thought they have to sort of, all the heathen women, they have to bring them into, modern, make them modern, give them education. So all sorts of reforms came out. Out of it, I think after 1826, providing education to women became one of the very important issues. At this time in Assam, we had some intellectuals. Slowly, a middle class developed. We have people, who sort of Gunaviram Bora and others who went to Calcutta, educated themselves. So these were the intellectuals of that time. And a few of them, but these were all upper class intelligentsia who tried to educate the woman, his wife, Vishnupriya, his daughter, Swarnalata, Anandaram Dhekyal Fukon's daughter, Padmavati Fukonani. So these girls were slowly educated. And in fact, Gunaviram Bora had his own journal, a very short-lived journal, where Hambandhu it was called, where he encouraged these women, his daughter, Anandaram Dhekyal Fukon's daughter, to write. I think these were the first writings by women in Assam. For example, they wrote many articles about women's education. That was the main controversy at that time, whether women should be educated or not be educated. But their voice was very meek, because there were just one or two women who wrote, compared to very strong men who, there was a constant debate and men opposed women's education. I think it is very interesting if our people here read those journals of that time, Ahombondhu, Mo, Junaki. Like Mo said, it was even more dangerous. Educating women was more dangerous than the Burmese invasion itself. It was that bad. So this women's voice, 2, 3 women writing for women's education or writing, even taking to writing against very, very strong men like Dr Bora, Ratneswar Mohanto and others who said, no, women should not write, women should not read, they will take to the streets, then it will lead to the public park, it will lead to immorality if women read. So this was the state of affairs. But by this time, the printing press had come. William Carey in Bengal had brought the printing press. In Assam, we have Cutter, who brought the press to Sibsagar. And some women used this press as a weapon against self-defense. A few women started writing. The missionaries also had a few journals, very interesting. One was called The Helping Hand. Then another one was called Now and Then, where, women got together. And printing. So this was the big. By the second half of the 19th century, we have more women coming forward then to write, like Chandraprabha Hoikiani, Rajabala Das, even Pushpalata Das, Nolini Bala Devi. All these women came forward. They were the women writers of the time who came and started writing. And they wrote about themselves, they wrote about the changing environment, they started narrating their own experiences. So this is for the first time we start hearing about women's experiences. Maybe you would like to ask me a few questions, but I will come back to you and tell you about 2 very important novels these women perspective. I'll come back to you after. Maybe you want to ask me something, or if especially, then I'll come back if you think.
Yeah. Well, in 1989, you had visited Yale University, Connecticut, USA, as a senior postdoctoral research scholar to work on the impact of the American Baptist missionaries on women in Northeast India. Please tell us something. This sounds so interesting. So please tell us about this project.
As you know, as I was working through all these magazines and writings of the missionaries, I got very interested, and I wanted very much to read what these missionary women had to write about the women of this path. But when I tried to find out what was here, there was nothing available. Nothing. All the papers had been sent back to the mission headquarters in Pennsylvania. So I applied for the scholarship. And again, I must tell you, when I did apply, 1989, you can imagine, Assam was still more backward than it is even now. When I applied and I was called for this interview in Delhi for the scholarship, all the big stalwarts whose names I've been reading, whose books they were all there, and they said, "Oh, you've come from Assam. You looking for a scholarship?" And we sort of but I went there, and when I met the board, they said, "Tell us what you want to do." I said, "I want to read about the women, missionary women, and what they came here for. I wanted to know what they thought of our women in Assam, and I can't find their writings, and that's what I want to go and see." find for myself. So they thought it was very interesting. Very soon I got the information and I went there. And it was such a wonderful time I had there. I cannot tell you. While working there, I got loads and loads of papers by missionary women on women of this part of our country. I found PhD scholars working in the libraries on a very small institution. I don't think many of our people know about that institution. It's called Miles Bronson's Orphanage. It was closed down later because the missionary board thought that the missionaries were spending too much time on educating girls rather than doing their work of missionary work. So they closed it down. But this was a short-lived orphanage, and I found some American scholars working on this orphanage. It was very interesting for me. You know, the type of syllabus which was prescribed for girls, the type of girls who came in, sort of activities, what they were taught to do. You know, what was the concept of smartness, intelligent, educated for them, and how our women coped with those, you know, things. It was very interesting to learn. So I had a wonderful time, and I was working for my postdoctoral with a professor called Professor Lamin Sane, who was a very, very well-known scholar. And it was a pleasure working for a few years. And this gave me an opportunity to go to Harvard and teach women's studies after that.
This where was this orphanage located?
In Nagaon.
Nagaon, okay.
It was in Nagaon. Yes.
Yeah.
And it was run by public funds.
Okay.
Missionaries were not paying for it. It was the public in America were paying for educating the girls here. And when the PhD thesis was on whether the public funded institution, whether the missionary board has the powers to close down an institution which was funded by the public. That was the PhD thesis she was working on. The syllabus, you know, very interesting. Till, you know, Miles Bronson, who had started this, he felt that women influence the children, the men, everyone, you know. So it is very important that women should be brought under the purview of their educational system. Because men come, they agree to convert, but when they go home, there is pressure at home and then they don't. So they did a lot to try and bring the women, educate the women so that they could read the Bible, they could influence the children at home. And the syllabus was prepared in that way. The lower classes, there was a common syllabus for the boys and girls. But from class 4 onwards, the syllabus differed. So actually my point here was that though they did a lot for education, they kept to the same pattern as the pattern of the British school or the British way of teaching. Because they said girls and boys need a separate syllabus. Girls were taught stitching, housework, mending of clothes, how to cook for the orphanage. Boys, they brought in people from America who taught them carpentry, who taught them, you know, agriculture, how to grow certain fruits. So as they became more and more to higher classes, the syllabus became separated.
Okay, so basically they were preparing.
They were taught in Assamese, unlike the British school. You know, the English schools or English medium school, you know, the British government had even removed Assamese as the language of the state for some time. And they introduced Bengali in some schools. But unlike that, the missionary schools continued to teach in Assamese.
Okay, so that is quite interesting. And now you've been associated with women's studies and research in the Northeast. And can you tell us about the evolution of women's studies in the academic institutions of Northeast India?
Yes, you see, women's studies centers was a need that was really felt from a long time, because though we scream and shout in different forums, nothing used to come about. And only activism was not enough. So we felt there must be a combination of activism with academics. And that is why we pressurized for the women's studies centers. And UGC also felt, I think, especially after several reports had been published by women activists about the condition of women, especially from the 1970s onward. The condition of women was proved to be very, very degraded. And so the UGC felt that women's studies centers must be introduced so that there is an academic, argument to the way we can improve the condition of women. Even just now, let me tell you, Teresa, 5 minutes before I joined your meeting, I was in a meeting where UGC is now again talking of closing down the women's studies centers in all the universities by 15th of September. Yeah, because they don't have funds. So we have formed a forum now where I am one of the members, and we are drawing up a petition about the need to continue these women's studies centers. If, if we think of any empowerment, any benefit for the women, once these centers are gone, means, nothing will happen. Universities, all the universities have introduced women's studies. But most of the men, most of the organizations headed by men treat these centers or treat these departments as something which they can sort of completely ignore. Members of the heads of the department of the centers are not even invited for the meetings where the heads are ahead of the department's meeting. They cannot participate in those meetings. Can you imagine? This is the way they treat the centers. But the centers are doing a lot of work, and there is a lot of research which has now gone in. We are now ready, armed with facts and figures about the condition of women. So it is not just hearsay that women are in bad shape, or women, no point saying that women are just the condition of women is bad. Women are not, being looked after. We have records about the health situation. We have records about all statistical figures about what it is like. So that way it has helped, but I hope they survive after the end of September.
Oh my God. And are there women's studies centers in all the universities in Northeast India?
No, not at all. Oh. You see, the colleges have cells. All the colleges under the universities have women's cells. Basically, they are supposed to do the same work as the centers do in the university. But the cells are more into activism. They go to the field, help women in the field. The university centers are both activism and research. In Assam, we have 4 universities: Gauhati, Dibrugarh, Tejpur, and Tripura also has, and Cotton University now. Now, out of that, the centers normally go from one phase to the other. They grow. Gauhati University has now grown into its 3rd phase and become a department. So Gauhati University is a department now, like any other department, that cannot be closed down. But the other universities are still in the first phase or 2nd phase, and they may be closed down by September.
Okay,
if
that
we do
would
not
be
fight hard.
That would be really terrible. Unfortunate. Yeah.
Very, very unfortunate.
Yeah. So let's come back to the beginning of women's writings in Assam. I just wanted to understand How do you see this, why and how some marginalized groups have been left out of this assorted basket of literature by women, because Northeast India is, so heterogeneous. There's so many groups of women and so many ethnic communities. Uh, but is it, if you evolution, is it still a prerogative of the elite, upper class people
Of
writing?
course, I think so. I think so. You will see that you always need some sort of support from somebody. Okay. For example, unless you have a godfather, literary godfather, or somebody, like in all matters, you go to acting, you go to anywhere, you need a godfather to push you. Even in literary matters, I feel somebody is necessary. As I said, if I go back right to the beginning when women started, right, there was these two women said, let me take the example of, say, Padmavati Devi Kukonani, Ananaram Tekel's daughter, who had the support of Gunaviram Bora. Now, he was an intellectual by his own standard. He was very open-minded, and she had his support. He had his own journal where he allowed her to write her pieces, publish her pieces. But a couple of years later, if we take Chandraprabha Hoyke, for example, say around, she came from a poor background, a rural background, poor background. She came from a lower caste. She had nobody to push her. Okay. Even going to school for her was difficult. She was not allowed to continue in her own village school. So she had to cycle miles away to another school because she was determined to learn and write. And finally, when she wrote, it was very well. She herself says there was obstacle at every stage, whether it was from her family, whether it was from the community, whether it is from the colonial administration. She was not allowed to write. People jeered at her. They called her a tomboy. They called her all sorts of things for writing. Her writing, people. She says that, no, I'm going to write whatever it is. So finally, she sat down. She decided to write her own life experiences in a book called Pitri Bhita, my parents' household, father's household. And where she narrated her entire experience, the difficulties under which she grew up, the circumstances of being a poor woman, of being a low caste woman. And this is what she tried to narrate. Now, if you look at her background, she was married to a man known as Dondinath Kolita. He was supposed to be of a higher caste than her. They got married in Tejpur. She had a son, but society did not accept her or would not let her be with him. So she left with her son. She came back to her father's house, and as a single mother, she reared the son. Now, Dondinath Kolita was a man, a literary man, and he got an award for a novel which he wrote. Correct. Now, the novel, very interestingly depicted, it was a story about Chandraprabha Hoyke, where he showed her as Prabha. She is the heroine. She is a very unconventional heroine. She joined the freedom movement. She used to move around on cycles. She used to allow men to come and see her. She used to go and visit men in their houses on cycles. And so finally, he said, though I loved her, I didn't marry her. I had to leave her. And he married someone else. Okay. And he got an award for this book. Okay. And as a rebuttal to this book, Chandraprabha Hoykani wrote her book, Pitri Bheta, about her own life experiences and what she faced as an author while writing. What were the difficulties? It was so difficult. And nobody was there. Nobody published a book. So now that book is not available. It was very shabby looking. It didn't even look like a novel, you know. So these are the difficulties which women face. And
So
I think they are very same even today.
So there are no copies available of that book?
No.
That's sad, yeah.
It is so sad. It's so sad, yes. Most of these writings, there are some very good writings. I would suggest, Teresa, for anyone who wants to read women's writings in the 19th century, these Assamese journals, all these journals which I had just named, I think they are a must. They're beautiful arguments about for and against women's education, women's, development. Few women's voices, but they really give us the women's perspective. Even Arunodaya has a few articles, but these Assamese journals are really great. I hadn't read them for a long time, but it is only, 6-7 years back that I started reading them very, very thoroughly for writing my own research work, papers. And then I found, oh my God, women were voicing themselves from the middle of the 19th century. They began to write, and it was this compulsion.
And what were
everything
the
was
arguments?
Within them. Everything was within them. They kept it, It was like bringing out something, vomiting out their, grievances when they got a chance to write and pen their, thing. So it was good. I mean, their main grievances were there, that they were not allowed to read, they were not allowed to write, they were not allowed to, it was considered a taboo for them even to speak loudly. They were told that if you write, you will become widows at a very young age. So even parents wouldn't allow them to write, read, especially write. Read they used to do quietly, but they couldn't pen their thoughts, not till very late. Only very few women came out to read and write. Unlike, by this time in Maharashtra and Bengal, you find a lot of women had come out. Assam anyway lagged behind in education for 50 years, so that 50 years gap remained, even for writing, women's writing, we lagged behind. There were a lot of writings from Bengal and Maharashtra, but Assam was lagging behind. I have scholars. I have one of my scholars, Yanwara. She was working on something in women in the freedom movement in Kachar. And I told her, you look at writing, how they involve themselves in the freedom movement in Kachar. There may be some writing in some journal. She couldn't find a single journal, you won't believe, not a piece of women's writing on the freedom movement.
So I think you really justify today's topic, why women write. So there have been many people who've been arguing with me, why are you even discussing why women write? But if you look at the historical context.
Initially, even I thought, this is quite a funny question. Women write because like everyone else writes, even women write. But there is a difference in their writing. And they were never allowed to write. Very different to the perspective of men's writing.
And regarding your book, titled Emergence of Feminism and Feminist Nationalism in Assam, Role of Chandraprabha Hoykani and the Assam Pradeshik Mohila Committee. Could you tell us something about the emergence of feminism in Assam?
By 1926, we find that women in other parts of the country had come out quite strongly and they had formed organizations. The most well-known one is the Indian Women's Association, which was formed in 1926. So that's how I got the idea of writing this book. I said, did anyone from Assam participate in this association? I wanted to know, were there any members from Assam? Because they were fighting against child marriage, Harbilas Sardal's bill against child marriage and other things. So I was very curious to know whether, and that is when I checked up and I found that Chandraprabha Harkeni had attended this All India Women Conference.
Okay. Where was
in
it?
1926 in Delhi.
Delhi.
In Delhi.
Okay.
Delhi. And I was quite surprised. And there were some, I forget the name, but there were a few women from Shillong. So obviously then I started trying to see under what banner Chandraprabha Harkeni landed up in Delhi to attend this conference. And I found it was this Assam Pradeshik Mahila Committee, which was formed in 1925. It was supposed to form, but in 1926 it took its formal thing, and then she went and attended it. Now even this Pradeshik Mahila Committee is so interesting how it was formed. You know, the Mohila committees were there, small Mohita local organizations were there in different parts of the state, but there was no Assam state organization. For some time, the women have been talking about combining and forming a common, organization for women. So they used to meet, the Mohila committee didn't have a building or anything. So Sahitya Sabha, every year when the Sahitya Sabha, Assam Sahitya Sabha met, after the Sahitya Sabha session was over, the women used to meet and hold discourses about the certain affairs of women. And in one occasion, Benudhar Rajkhwa suggested to them, why don't you form an organization? So they decided in 1925, after the Mohila Committee, Assam Sahitya Sabha meeting is over, they will form the Assam Pradeshik Mohila Committee, formal organization they will form. But in 1925, when the Assam Sahitya Sabha meeting was going on, Chandraprabha Harkeni was invited to attend that meeting. When she went to attend that meeting, she was not allowed to sit with the men. She found that the separate area had been that they had been given a place to sit in that Sahitya Sabha. But Chandraprabha Harkeni was very upset. Why should we sit separately? So she refused to sit there and she went and sat in the first row with the men. Okay. And then the organizers of the Sahitya Sabha invited her to speak. That please come to the dais and speak a few words. So she went there and she called all the women. She said, please come. Why are you sitting like that, like caged birds? Come out, all of you. Come to the dais and join me. So all the women walked out of that parda and they came and joined her. That was supposed to be the first protest meeting by women of Assam. First protest by women. Very interesting. And then that year they didn't form the Mohila Committee because of this confusion. The following year, the Mohila Committee.
And when you talk about contemporary politics, now we have this whole discourse about this binary about Hindu and Muslim. So I'm just curious. Did you come across any Muslim women writing? Any Muslim women who were part of these Mahila Samitis?
Yes. Mahila Committee members, there were a number of Muslims. In fact, some of the Mahila Committee activities included, they wanted to become independent of all financial, help which they were getting from different. So they started weaving, cooking classes and all. And there are several Muslim, I can't give you the names right now, but I have it in my book. There were several Muslim women who came forward and they said they would teach cooking to the women folk, So it was, I don't think this sort of divide was felt at all in those early years. No, not at all. I think Assamese Muslims formed very much a part of the society at that time. They were very much part and parcel. I remember growing up in a society where my father's best friends were, Muslim friends. And we used to spend days with them. So when I read, now when you're asking, it strikes me. But when I wrote this book, it never struck me how Hindu women sort of without a question, they accepted Muslim women coming and teaching them how to cook, how to embroider, all these things were taught by several Muslims. And in the committees too.
And what about Muslim women writing? Did you come across any women writers?
I have not particularly sort of come across any women writers, notable women writers of the 19th century in Assam. But yes, in other parts of the country, there were
many. There were many, yeah.
Many.
Yeah.
Several, right? Some of them are very, very well known.
And, you had taught women's history at the Divinity School, Harvard University in 1996 as a visiting lecturer. Please tell us about your experience, teaching women's history, at Harvard.
Well, it was a very different experience to my experience here. Very, very different experience in the sense that when I first went, it was like a class, it was like talking to a group of friends. And I thought they would not understand because I'm talking about I was mainly, though I was talking of women's history throughout the world, I was asked to concentrate on history of women in India. And because Northeast is so unknown to everybody, so I decided that let me concentrate, and women of this part are so different to women of other parts of the country. So I said, let me concentrate on Northeast India more, because I asked them, have you been to India? Many of them raised their hands. I said, where have you been? They all know Delhi, Bombay, Jaipur. So I presumed they have seen women there, and I knew they had not met women from this part. And so I mostly talked to them about women of the Northeast, the tribal women, how women differ, the differences between the women of the Northeast and women of other parts of our country, and women in different parts of the world. And I sometimes had a doubt that maybe they would not be interested because I'm talking about such a remote part of the world, But T.B. Teresa, they were, I don't think they ever believed that women could do what our women can perform, So they used to come at night. I used to find small slips under my door saying, Madam, we love hearing about this. Can you talk some more tomorrow on this issue? So that was really very interesting for me. So gradually I started taking a map. I started pointing out each state, and then I started showing pictures of women from different states, talking about them, about the women. So it was very nice. They enjoyed themselves very much. And it was, the women's studies department there are very, very strong, very strong. So even in 1996, when I was there, women's studies had become a very, very strong discipline. And women were pursuing these disciplines. I think we have not even reached anywhere near those disciplines as they were in 1996. So it was very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. I mean, I had a wonderful time, and I visited. And a Fulbright, as a Fulbright scholar, one thing they insisted, they said the moment you go to the States, there will be lots of people from Assam, from India, who will come to invite you, who will want to stay with them, who will want you to interview, they will want to entertain you. But we would request you to please spend your time with American families so that you have a cross-cultural exchange. So I made it a point to be always with American women, and women, mind you, more than families. I stayed with a lot of women. My librarian, where I was working in Boston, was a woman. The person I stayed with while I was working at Harvard was a woman. I shared an apartment with her. So it was all women. And I got to, there was a lot of exchange about our behaviors, our thoughts, our ideas, and the way women were treated in the country and there.
Yeah. So, it's so interesting. We could go on and on. I just wanted to know, how do you think how can historians bridge the gap about the Northeast? Over the decades, there have been so many myths and stereotypes created about the region, and especially about its women. You know, that tribal women are empowered, they are this, they are that, those kind of stereotypes about the region. What role can historians play in dispelling those myths?
Well, if you ask me that question, I feel very embarrassed because we have a very big role to play, but we have not done it. And I accept my failure in this matter because it was our duty to have, done away with this. I will tell you a little story. When I was writing this book about Konoklata Bora, I was told, that Prime Minister on 8th of March, Prime Minister was going to inaugurate 8 books on 8 women martyrs of the country. One was this book on Konoklata. At first I said no because the time was very short, but then I thought if I don't do it once again, Assam will be left out. 8 women from 8 parts of the country will be highlighted, as if Assam did nothing for the 1942. So I said, okay, you'll be surprised. My research tells me Konoklata Bora was the youngest martyr in the country for the 1942. And that to a girl. Now the government has a long list of 20 martyrs under the age of 18. Okay, where they say Khudiram Bose from Bengal was the youngest martyr. He was 18 years old. There is not a mention of Konoklata Bora, whereas my research says he was the youngest martyr in the country for that. Now, this is how the history of the Northeast is totally left out. Totally left out. No one knows about this. When this to point out to the Prime Minister that this is why the Northeast is left out. This is a list which has been prepared without research, where even the name of Konoklata Bora. If you look at the history of the freedom movement written by all well-known, renowned authors, Assam is nowhere. Big volumes of Cambridge history, big volumes of history by R.C. Mazumdar. Assam is nowhere in the picture, maybe 2 lines up. And one instance, even a great historian like Romila Thapar has said Assam is a country land of hills and mountains.
Mm-hmm.
See, so we have a lot to teach, lot to bridge the gap, which we did get the opportunity. But even our research, I think maybe we were too inexperienced. We didn't know which direction to take our research in. We have not been in. And that is why now I feel so happy when I'm translating this 13 volumes of, manuscripts. You see, there are manuscripts on Jaintia, there are manuscripts on Pachari. Now for the Jaintias, these manuscripts are the sole resources for writing the history, but they can't read these manuscripts. Original manuscripts are not there. So they are reading what British colonial writers had written, what S.K. Bhuyan has translated in Assamese, and someone else has translated into English and given them. So now when they know that we are translating this Buranjis, they're just waiting. I'm just getting messages from Gauhati professors from there saying, when will these volumes be released? We want to read our own history from the manuscript.
Okay.
So we are very, very far behind still. There's a lot to be done.
And when you are going through these manuscripts, the Buranjis, do you see women there? Did you find any women?
Well, Teresa, every war that was fought, every treaty that was signed, a princess or a woman had to be given for peace. There was nothing happening without women. Okay? So a woman had to be given. There would be a long list of things, so many elephants, so many horses, so much of silver, so much of gold, and so many women. Or so many princes.
Okay.
So we formed a part of that.
Okay, part of the bounty.
Yeah, part of the bounty.
Okay. Yeah. So now you have done the role of a columnist. You write a column for the Assam Tribune, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Well, not very long back, but I think it has been some time now. Rani Raimati has requested me, so I said, okay.
Okay. So tell us what prompts you to write. We've been talking about all the women who write and who don't write. So tell us about you. What prompts you to write?
What prompts me to write? What prompts me to write is very sporadic. Whatever I feel like writing at the moment, I pick it up. For example, when I was in the States, I asked people why they don't come to the North. Those were not computer days, Those were days there were no computers up. So they said, we don't even know. We don't know where to find anything about Assam. There's nothing available. So I decided to write a book. The moment I came back, I wrote this book on enchanting journey through India's Northeast. Okay, there's a book on actually the various places of interest. It's based a little bit on history. I've given background about what the foreign travelers had to visit, which places they visited, what they had to say about different places in Assam, and a little bit about the history of all the important places for people to know. And 3 or 4 editions of that book went in a jiffy because there was nothing. Now, of course, it's out of print again. At the moment, I'm very taken up with my work with conservation. So I'm doing a lot of old manuscript conservation, on Hasipat. I'm involving myself on sort of conservation work. So I have conserved about 124 manuscripts in Majuli, and I digitized them. And now I'm publishing that into a book. It's already underway. So that's coming. At the moment, I'm working in the museum in Mayong, where I'm trying to collect all the magic books, the black magic, white magic manuscripts. And I'm trying to recover stories from those who are alive, how they used to capture tigers with magic and all sorts of things, very interesting. So these are the things, I mean, whatever interests me. Then, of course, my history is something that, I'm forced to write women's issues and sort of interest me a lot. So I write on women's issues quite a bit. So these are the things that I write. But I've never taken writing as a, I haven't actually, the university job was teaching and examinations, that sort of thing takes up a lot of your time. So I've never taken writing as a profession as such. But in between whatever I've been doing, when I look at it, I find that yes, I have written, at least done some work, and I feel if I can translate the Buranjis and leave them behind, it will be a big contribution for Assam.
Definitely. And that too by a woman. And I was just wondering.
That too by a woman.
I was just wondering, when you spoke about the magic books of Mayong, did you find any female magician there? I'm just curious. Or any female who did black magic? Plenty? Okay.
Plenty. I have photographs. And you will find, I mean, no, and even now, till today, they are the ones who know so much. They're very hesitant. In the beginning, they're very suspicious. They don't like to come out, but they are so knowledgeable. And believe me, Teresa, they know every plant around. You ask them what this plant, they will tell you this is. We talk of natural medicine. That was, if you look at the puthis or the mantras, how they cured, say, a disease. It was basically by using these natural herbs, So I found a box of one magician who's no longer alive. There were bones of different types of fish. I don't know what he did with them. I'm going to meet his son and discuss. But these are the type of things that you find inside these boxes. So anyway, it's very interesting work. It keeps me very busy. And in spite of COVID, I must tell you, without my children knowing, without anyone knowing, I keep visiting Mayong in spite of all lockdowns. Whenever I get a chance, I keep running. I'm going again on Monday. So this is what I'm busy with.
I think it was a very, very interesting discussion, Dr. Bora. Thank you so much. I wish we could go on, and it was so informative, and I'm sure this will, help many of our students who are researchers who are working on women's studies. It was really wonderful talking to you, Dr. Bora, and I hope we have.
Having me.
I just hope we have more such conversations, and would love to read your book on the magicians of Mayong. Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as it's out, we will. Sure. I will give you a copy.
Thank you so much.
I can see Bratati here. Bratati, so nice to get a message from you.
Yeah, and yeah. So yeah, if you, I don't see any questions, but yeah, there are a lot of people watching. And this video will be uploaded on YouTube. So we'll share the link. And thank you once again. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for watching. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.